Welcome to New World Awakening. I am your host, Douglas Gabriel, and this is the seventh and final presentation in our series. Today's theme is enlightenment. Now, just as in every other presentation that we've made, we make sure that the theme is addressed from the central point of view of the human being, how you would experience it. So let's recapitulate some of the things that we've been speaking about in this series. And there is a reason that they were presented in 7. As we have heard so distinctly in the last 2 presentations, we are talking about a path. We're talking about a path that starts in one place, comes down through 3 stages to the middle where we find who we are, our I am, our ego consciousness, and then goes through 3 stages back to where you began. This path is the path of enlightenment. It is the path that is described in so many religions and so many traditions that we'll describe some of those today. But first, let us go back and see where it is that we've come from so that we can build upon the very things that we need to move into these next 3 stages. So we started off with revolution, the revolution that's happening all around us. And we found that if we do not have a consciousness of who we are, where we came from, where we are now, and where we're going, then you're going to be lost in the revolution. You'll probably simply stay asleep. You will not awaken. You might be overwhelmed by these forces because you do not understand where you fit into this picture. Now, this is crucial. We call it a worldview or a cosmology, but let's just go back to the simplest picture that we gave you from the beginning. In the oldest writings, philosophical, religious writings called the Upanishads from the tradition of the Vedas, we mentioned that there is only one thing that needs to be done, and that's that you need to realize that outside of you is God, Brahman, they called this being. All things, everything, Brahman. And the only thing that is not Brahman is you, your consciousness of Brahman. And then the only task you have is to reunite with Brahman. And this part they call inside of you that is part of Brahman is called Atman. So when the Atman unites with the Brahman, you merge back into the source, the one, the place you came from, and the place you're going. Now this is a very simple picture. We also painted the picture of, say, a hologram or a holograph, but a holograph 3D because that's what we are, but we understand a hologram, a 2-dimensional hologram. We imprint this image in it. If we break it into pieces, every piece still has whatever the image, say we put an image of an apple or a tree inside of that, every single piece will have that picture in it, independently, separately. And that's what we are. We're a piece of that giant hologram, and our cosmology teaches us how we fit into that and how we relate to that in terms of time and how we relate in terms of space as we grow through it. So that was the first presentation, was on revolution. And we pointed out that when you get a cosmology and you understand who you are, because the ancient mystery teachings, which we referred to in the 4th presentation, in the Greek Mystery Initiation Center above the temple door, it said, "Know thyself, and you will know the world and the gods." And that's what we were trying to show, that as the revolution is happening all around us, we need to have a firm I am that knows who it is, where it has been, and where it is going. Now, where are you going to get that? That is the trick, to find your worldview, to find your cosmology, that then builds for you a picture of where it is you're going on this path, because we all awaken to this amazing physical body. And that's what the first presentation was really on. In the 7 stages, we're talking about the bodies of the human being. The physical body, the life body, etheric body, same thing. The astral body or body of desires. And then your own singularity, your ego. And then as we've already pointed out, we go into new realms of resurrection beyond death, ascension, and enlightenment, which we'll speak about in a minute. But we all have a physical body that is a temple. And this physical body, though it is evolving, is kept alive by an etheric body, a life body. That etheric body is a cosmic body that is actually available for everyone. It's the body of life that sustains us. So every night when we sleep, the etheric body builds the physical body back up. As we know, there's something that builds it up. We call it the etheric body, the life body. So when we take true possession of our physical body, we can then stand amidst the revolution. But the revolutions, as we pointed out in the second presentation, begin to look very apocalyptic. And the only way to take that I am of yours and your cosmology is to also understand in that cosmology that you have a soul that is trying to unite with your spirit. In essence, that is the entire path, whether we call it the spiritual path of the prodigal son or the alchemical path of the king and queen that makes a child that then rises up to become the new king. All these different analogies, whether it's Eros and Psyche, whether it's Hercules, who tames the 12 zodiacal forces, the animal forces, and then goes into the underworld, conquers death, comes back up into his resurrection body, and then later rises in his ascension body into the stars, where, according to the Greeks, he remains there to inspire everyone who looks up to those, what they called the burning lights of the stars. And so a combination of those burning lights tells the heroic deeds of this great initiate, Heracles, who was actually a woman, Psyche, and then later was called Hercules. This being rises up into the stars. Psyche, who marries Cupid, rises up into the stars. That's what happens. That's the ascension factor. But enlightenment is only when you truly go back to the throne from which you came. They depicted the stars as a throne, and on that throne there was a fire. And that throne is your throne. It's the throne you came, usually it's depicted you came out from underneath the throne, came down into a physical, etheric, astral, ego bodies, and now you're trying to go back to that throne, to sit on the throne. Because now that you've gone through these stages of mastery, and then if you choose the stages of initiation, ascension, and enlightenment, which is a process that happens naturally over a long period of time, but if you choose that process of initiation, you first must have a cosmology. Second thing you must have is an understanding that you have a body, a soul, and a spirit. We know the body, but the soul, we would acknowledge, those are our feelings, emotions. But then, if you don't know you have a spirit, you will not find it. You will not find it until a very far distant future, if in fact you find it even then. So to wake up to our apocalyptic times, you must have a revelation that lets you see that your soul is striving towards your spirit, and that it will attain that. And in the images that we presented from all the different apocalypses and revelations in different traditions, those images are whatever religious images you have, whatever represents morality, truth, beauty, goodness, love, all of those things that represent the powerful forces of the spirit manifesting in the physical world, those are the forces that you will see when you have a revelation. It may happen quickly, or it may happen over a long period of time, but undoubtedly, at the threshold between the physical world and the spiritual world, the seen world and the unseen world, you will experience those images of revelation, of apocalypse, once you cross that threshold. And that was what we gave in the third presentation, was to show you that when you have an I, an ego, it must cohere and pull together the three soul forces, thinking, feeling, and willing. And the reason they must be pulled together is because mankind has been pulled across the threshold into the unseen world. So we have spiritual forces coming across that threshold, entering into this physical world. Spiritually, we also have from the negative side other forces streaming in, and that's what causes our revolutionary apocalyptic times. And if you cannot cohere your thinking, feeling, and willing and get control of them so that your singularity of your I can control them, so that when you have a thought, it is linked to your feeling and it is linked to your will. In other words, you think before you do. You do not let your emotions rule your will. You only bring your will into things that you have thought through and that you truly believe from your heart. When that happens, coherence happens. And as you cross the threshold, then you will not face the three evil beasts of thinking, feeling, and willing: neurosis, psychosis, and the aberration of sex and violence. These three demons who will hound you like the three-headed hound of hell. Because as you're crossing the threshold, you are Hercules, you are Psyche, you are the new hero, heroine, who is entering into a realm that is terrifying. It's so terrifying because it's facing death. And if you have the forces to go through that and stay awake, which is what our theme is from the first through the seventh presentation, New World Awakening, if you stay awake and you do not slumber, you will have that force in your own I am, your singularity. Not only that shows you where you came from, where you are, and where you're going, but can then connect your soul to your spirit so that you have the forces to develop the morality to be able to get across the threshold and initiate yourself. And that's what we talked about after we described the singularity of the human being, the I am consciousness. We talked about the next phase. And those three stages are really the future. If you're an initiate, someone who wants to press forward and not just progress at the normal pace, but wishes to progress at a quicker pace, you can choose the path of initiation. We spoke of that, of course, in the fifth presentation. And in the path of seven, from first, second, third, fourth to the middle, the fifth stage is what is new. That is what we're working on right now. We cannot be expected to ascend and reach enlightenment. Those stages are far in the future, but I am going to tell you how you can, for moments, attain that. But first, that is only if you choose to consciously face the threshold of death, which is also the threshold of sleep, and the threshold you cross when your consciousness enters the spiritual world or the unseen world. If you can muster those forces and choose to be initiated, you don't need a guru, a teacher, a religion, a church, even though, as I've said before, any traditional religion practiced in a pure way is as effective as any other. It is not the religious images and symbols. It's not even what's being taught. It's what arises in the human being is the response to religion. And now, in our age in the West, we are a religion of one. We must find our own spiritual North Star, and we must initiate ourselves. But the great news is there are many spiritual beings who, as we have said, the threshold of the spiritual world has been opened. The door has been opened. More spiritual beings are here now than ever before. Now, we can call these beings who've gone through what we characterize as initiation in the fifth presentation, we could call them saints, holy people, Mahatmas. There are so many names for them. Shamans, magicians, magi. They were called druids. They were called the priests and the priestesses of the mystery initiation centers. All of these different people who then actually, through one form or another, become initiated to the point that they can go across the threshold and feed the spiritual beings in the spiritual world, and then bring back enough nourishment that they then have the strength to turn around and give that out as a high initiate. And that will always take the form of love and mercy and gratitude and all of the higher virtues. And so there are people who, in their singularity, and as we spoke about before, the development is we should find our consciousness in our heart, and the areas below we should have developed already. We don't need to stimulate what would be called the Kundalini force anymore, because that force is always flowing. But we do need to tame the lower chakras. So if you have not started on the path of ascension and gone to ourspirit.com and looked at this beautiful path that Dr. Tyla has given you, which is a path that makes sure that you're connecting to the earth through the lower chakras, that you're connecting to good food, that you're connecting to enzymes, that you're making sure that your colon is working properly, that you have proper digestion and nutrition. Because if you don't, you probably will not have the energy that it takes to develop the consciousness to enter the spiritual world as an initiate. So you need to tame your sex, your eating, all of your habits, all of the lower desires. When those are tamed, then you can start on the path of initiation after you've purified, prepared, done oblations, developed your morality, and worked on certain paths that will prepare you, and you can choose whichever path you want, but those paths are all morality training to turn you away from vices and towards virtue. And if you develop that to the point that we also have those other gifts that we spoke of, a cosmology, the understanding that our soul is trying to reach out for our spirit to reunite with it, to be able to control our own demons, these lower chakras, and understand who our I am is, and as we talked about, pulling those forces of thinking, feeling, and willing into one coherent being, and we say goodbye to the lower self. We spoke a lot in the fourth presentation about selfishness and selflessness. Up to age 28, we need to be selfish. We're gathering everything we should be gathering from the love of all those around us. And after 28, we should be selfless. We should give back that love. And so everything has its own season. Initiation has its own season. The things I've described before, they all have their time. And so if you have decided that you want, or you already have, taken your own initiation into your own control, into your own hands, per se, and started that ascent from the heart up into the higher energies, the higher nerve ganglia, what would be called chakras, but they're also, these are real physical forces that we're dealing with. And you take these forces into these higher realms, you are in fact going into these three other higher realms, what we would call the fifth, sixth, and seventh realms. We also described how initiation is, in a way, taking the taming of your astral body, your body of desires. And so the singularity is the fourth. The fifth replicates the third. But it doesn't replicate it on the same level. It takes it to a new higher harmonic, a new octave. It takes it into a new realm. Because if you do not take it up, it will take you down. You could, for instance, if you do not stay a progressive spirit by always moving forward with what's being presented for consciousness to develop, then you fall behind. You fall into the lower realms. But if you are pushing yourself into these other realms, you're actually pushing yourself into the future, into who you will be as a higher being. Call it a saint, an angel, an archangel, whatever name you want to call it. There are very specific names for these three realms that we will be progressing through in the future. But you might ask, why would we discuss them now? Because each night, if you have initiated yourself, if you have tamed your astral body, if you've learned spiritual sacred rituals that connect you to the beings across the threshold through your activities each day in the physical world, if you have learned to respect your physical body as the spiritual temple of the cosmos, that you become a co-creative God inside of this temple of the cosmos, then you have what it takes. You have, looking at your body of desire, you look at it with wonder, with reverence, with awe. As Einstein said, there are two ways to live life. One, to believe that there are no miracles. The second is to believe that everything is a miracle. And when you look at the true physical life manifestations in this plane, they are miracles. That wonder, that reverence, that awe is what tames your own astral body of desire. Wonder is the key to entering into the realm of initiation. If you do not wonder about these realms, if you were not curious, you would not have the desire to enter into them. So there are pure desires, the desire for enlightenment. And we'll talk about that in a minute. It's called bodhicitta, or the vow of the bodhisattva, which is that you desire only one thing, and that's to reach enlightenment as fast as you can, not for your sake, but for the sake of everyone else, so that you can help them. That's the true desire that gets you through initiation, because initiation is scary. As we go through this life, what we saw as revolution and as apocalypse and as a ripping apart of our own being, what is that? That's what happens when you cross the threshold. Those are the trials of earth, water, fire, and air. Once you pass through them, you become strong enough that in the spiritual world you have enough light that you can look around, that you can begin to build a domicile, a hut, a home, a temple, as Christ called them, the mansions of the heavens, of the Heavenly Father. We build those with our own morality. So that is what we're working on now. And it is the forces of wonder and reverence and awe in the taming of the astral body that can get you through that. But as you go further into the etheric and further into the physical, you actually reach into higher realms, which is somewhat perplexing when you're thinking about it. But imagine that life body that you have that is sustaining you all day long, but also at night rebuilds your physical body. We have really no control over that. We do have control over, we have wonder and awe for the world, and as Einstein said, to see everything as a miracle. But do we have control over the etheric body? If we did, then we would have control over the forces of ascension. Those life forces, as Christ said when Mary Magdalene came, "Do not touch me, for I have yet to ascend." And then later we saw that Christ in the Gospels ascended into a very brilliant, bright cloud, and two beings dressed in white came down and spoke to them and said, "Christ has ascended into the clouds and he will return." Well, that's what we hear in all of the different faiths, that in this realm, well, the Hindus have a name for it, but the being of Krishna, who is Vishnu, has incarnated 10 times in a row. He's the sustainer. He comes into the realm of sustaining life. It's the same realm as described as the etheric realm, where some say Christ right now has left his Holy Spirit. Or one could say that Avalokiteshvara exists in the Tibetan Buddhism tradition, or Chenrezig, the being of love. So around the earth is a life body of love. And in that realm, saints and holy people are in their ascension body. And Christ, as the perfect archetype, showed us that he was able to literally disappear or appear, to take on form or to not take on form in his ascension body. But we sometimes forget that Christ did not finish what he promised. He did not ascend to his throne. He ascended to the recognition that he had this throne, but he said that he would be with the earth until the end of time. He said he would send his Holy Spirit as the comforter. And so what we have here is, in the realm of ascension, the support that we need that can take our lower self that we leave in the physical world, because nothing can cross the threshold between the physical into the spiritual that is brain-bound, sense-bound, lower desires. None of those things can enter there. Our lower self cannot enter into the higher realm. Only our higher self can. That higher self is born in our soul, and we called it either the consciousness soul or we called it the spiritual soul. It is in contact with what we would call the spirit self, or most people would call your higher self. That concept is fairly well understood by Westerners, even if they don't believe in reincarnation or don't believe in some higher beings or some higher deities. The idea that you have a higher self, that you would have a higher thinking or a higher feeling or higher morality or higher virtues, seems to be accepted by everyone. So when you're talking about that realm seems to be universal and common to all. So once we leave our lower self behind, we enter into the realm of resurrection, the realm of our higher self. We must then continue to develop until we reach the realm of ascension. And at that level, even your higher self becomes united with all of the other higher selves that you can imagine are like yourself. Those who have progressed, those who have gone through initiation. Now, these are things that will happen in the future, but they can also happen now. So when we're speaking of Gautama Buddha, Pythagoras, Lao Tzu, Confucius, when we're speaking of Orpheus, these are human beings who really did enter into a path of initiation and ascension. And gave us works that were so beautiful. They were transmissions from the Spirit. And that is what ascension is about. Ascension is preparing yourself to be selfless enough, even in your higher self, that you can accept the cosmic all, what is called the Brahman. Now, these three realms have many names. And so let me name a few of them and see if any of these are part of the path that you're involved in. In Hindu, Vedic philosophy, they're called nirvana. We've heard of that. So our path of resurrection is also called nirvana. Then the path of ascension is called paranirvana, a higher nirvana that goes into the realm of life. And then we call it the spirit human being. So one form of it is called spirit self, life spirit, spirit human being, nirvana, paranirvana, mahaparanirvana. In Buddhism, they're called manas, buddhi, and atman. And there you see that word atman because it's the highest that there is. Somehow it is a monad of your spiritual self that you will become in the far distant future, that was created in the far distant past and held in these realms of the physical, etheric, astral so that you could come to birth and then grow like a plant through these stages back to the very place that you came from. Something we might imagine like a plant in a seed. But where did the seed come from? But imagine the seed is there and it grows back to its home, the sun. So what is it that is in us? What is this I am? We've described it as the holographic representation of the universe. In many of these stages, it's described as in the realm that we are calling the realm of ascension. That is the realm where the sun and the 6 planets are active. So in the first realm of the higher self, or the spirit self, or what we would just call the realm of nirvana, that is entering into the realm of the moon, where you find your higher self. But when you enter into the realm of the sun and the 6 planets, that is a realm that is where your I am will find as a home, as you find that your higher self is merged with the higher selves of many others. Because if we were to be honest about it, the light that is inside of us came from the sun. It's the warmth, the light, the sound, and the life of the sun. And the sun and the 6 planets do not move in the pattern that we have always imagined they move in. Computers have now shown us, by doing computer simulations of the exact pattern of the sun. Remember, the sun is moving 660,000 miles an hour towards Vegas. And behind it, they now know, are magnetic ropes connected to each of the planets. And those magnetic ropes come in and make contact, magnetic contact points. This is the newest science out there, the newest satellites around the Earth looking at the magnetosphere. They noticed these brilliant, bright doorways opening, the cosmonauts, when they were in space. And so they studied them. They're called magnetic transfer flux points, or they're called magnetic flux doorways. Somehow, in a flash of a moment, only a few seconds, a magnetic rope reestablishes itself in one of these doorways in the magnetosphere around the Earth and connects that magnetic rope all the way to the sun. So the sun is moving forward and the magnetic ropes are pulling the planets behind. And what pattern do you think they're making? Not an ellipse, not a circle, not a sphere. They're making the pattern of DNA. This can be looked up anywhere on the internet, but if you look at the true pattern of the sun, it is clearing space ahead of the 6 planets being pulled behind it. That is what's happening below your rib cage. Your heart is your sun. There are 6 organs, major organs there. There are also 7 chambers in your heart, and there are 7 chambers in your brain. Some of those chambers have yet to be discovered because, as I said, the physical body is not perfect yet. It is evolving, and in the future it will evolve into things that we can hardly imagine at this point. I could describe them from the traditions, but let us just say we would become more of a perfect sphere, a beautiful, translucent, radiant, like the sun, giving out warmth and light and sound and life. And so Pythagoras called this motion of the sun and the planets the harmony of the spheres. When you reach the realm of ascension, that is the realm of the harmony of the spheres. So if you can simply go inside of yourself, you can connect to those spheres and the very beings that populate them, that animate them, and that create the wisdom of their movement. All of that wisdom is inherent in your physical body. There is nothing in the cosmos, including the stars, which are not in your body. We have 200 billion nerve cells in our brain. Well, there's generally 200 billion stars in a galaxy, and there's 200 billion galaxies in our universe. Some say that the rounded shape of the universe, as they now describe it as actually a dodecahedron, is really a brain thinking. Well, we have a rounded cosmos, and we are thinking, and we have 200 billion nerve cells below us. We are a co-creator, a god of sorts, called a baby god, you could call it, a god in the becoming, a goddess in the becoming. And we have these capacities, but we're only coming into them. So when I describe the capacities that arise, imagination from going through initiation, this living thinking, the realm of, some would call the angels, or the next realm of ascension. Some would call that the realm of the archangels, the realm of inspiration, the realm of the harmony of the spheres, the realm of the music that dances everything into creation. That motion that we see not only in our own DNA and in all protein and sugars, but all the way up to the sun and the planets and their motion and the motion of the galaxies. We've described that before. A galaxy is the torus that's in your heart. And the supermassive black hole or the ion jet coming out of it, those are the stages of breathing of your heart. There is nothing in the cosmos, even the number of breaths and heartbeats in a day replicate the precession of the equinox, 25,960 years it takes for what is called the Botanic year, or the precession of the equinoxes. That is a direct reflection of our breath and our heartbeat. And as you may or may not know, 7.83 is the Schumann wave. That's the resonance of the Earth as it spins in the cavity of our atmosphere. That is the same exact vibration as your heart. And now they find that that frequency is coming from cosmic space, 7.83 hertz. And so we are dancing in the realm of ascension, the music of the spheres, and those are active in our own physical bodies. We do not need a guru. We do not need a teacher. You barely need a path. What you need is the commitment and the morality, because to go into the spiritual world and to come back consciously, you have to be moral. You have to have done beautiful deeds of virtue, of love, of grace, of mercy, of compassion, of patience. That's what gives you the ability to be conscious, because as we spoke about before, we are in a divine communion with the beings beyond the physical world. We take our moral deeds to them and they are food to them. And at night, they give us food back. And this is being found out more and more by science. I mentioned before, pituitrin is excreted in the pituitary gland, which then causes your vascular and your nervous system to basically act as if it's just been given steroids. It's called the dew of heaven, amrita, soma. These things are excreted in your own body. So now the rage, it's an amazing rage. I can hardly believe how many people are rushing off to South America to take ayahuasca because they believe that they're going to have an experience of transcendence that reconnects them to their source, a transcendental experience. And most of them say that they do have that experience, but they actually go down and they go through these ritual processes of taking ayahuasca, which is basically derived from plants. It's a natural forming substance and it naturally forms in your body. Matter of fact, they call it the God particle. And so some people believe that enlightenment can be attained by a momentary experience. That is true, and this is how it happens. In the realm of ascension, it's inspiration that is given to us through the sounding of the harmony of the spheres. But in the realm, the highest realm that a human being can attain while in a physical body is the realm of intuition, the realm of Mahaparinirvana, the realm called Atman. When you attain that, it is only for oftentimes 1 second, if 1 second. It's like an inspiration, or it's like the imaginations, the living imaginations we spoke of. If you see a living imagination given through this realm of the angels, as called by the Christians, you'll never be the same. It will change you. It will inspire, it will give you inspiration, continuous striving towards that. But if you have a moment of inspiration and you hear a beautiful song, or you come out of a vision or a dream, or you have a day vision, that can happen in a flash of a second. But that inspiration, and we've seen it with so many scientists, that they work, then they give up, and then in a flash of a second, they have the inspiration that changes the world, that changes the way we look at the world. They've been looking at it over and over and over again, and then in a flash of inspiration, they get so much content that it takes them years to unpack that content, that inspiration, and it fills them with life. It fills them with drive, sometimes for the rest of their life. One moment of inspiration. So you may only have that one moment. You may only have a few moments of inspiration in your entire life, and yet it could sustain you like nourishment. But when you reach the realm of intuition, it is a most remarkable thing. Because the realm of intuition puts you in direct alignment with the spiritual world. The spiritual world and the beings in it are not restricted by time and space or even consciousness. And so when you have an intuition, it's not a déjà vu where you think you're repeating something you saw in a dream. It is that you know something. You are 100% absolutely certain, and it's usually something that contains the future. It may not specifically be the future, but it will tell you about the future, and it will tell you about something that is beyond time and beyond space and awakens your consciousness, just as inspiration awakens your feeling. Intuition will awaken your consciousness in this way. You will feel fired up in your heart that you must do something that is virtuous, like love, something that is eternal, like a virtue, because when you see this and it comes to you, you know this, and you know you're going to take part in this. You know you are going to be the eyes, the ears, the hands, the feet, the heart, the will of the divine. You know there's nothing can stop it. You know you want to do it, and you know that you're participating freely, even though you knew about it before it happened in many cases. In other words, it's almost completely inexplicable. Has nothing to do, oftentimes, with the physical world, and oftentimes has to do with extremely transcendental circumstances and content and consciousness. And usually it's when liberation arises, when you feel tremendous freedom, and usually you will then have the following experience. The experience of enlightenment. And from what we hear from those who say, or the traditions that say that people reached enlightenment, and by the way, those people sometimes go into the realm of ascension and they stay there and they continue to teach. There are tens of thousands of teachings in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition from beings who live in that realm. And so when you rise up into that realm, you can become then the person, like in the book of Revelation, who writes it down and brings it back. And so intuition makes you an agent of the Spirit. It transcends time and space. It transcends even initiation. It transcends even ascension. It goes all the way to the future and all the way to the past, right back to that throne or whatever it is that you believe you came from. It takes you to your source. It takes you to the all. And you may only have those experiences a few times in your life, but when you have them, they are absolutely recognizable. You will never be able to forget them, and you will never be able to forget the effect they had upon your life, because it will drive you and it will give you the following motivation. Those who have reached enlightenment, supposedly, in the traditions, say that they take a vow. And that vow, you might be more familiar with the vow through Kuan Yin. The being Kuan Yin is this very high spiritual being of love who usually you see her taking her vial, her vase, that she has stored up of all of her virtue and morality, and she's feeding it to a dragon because she's taken a vow of the Bodhisattva, the vow which is a being on the way to enlightenment but is not there. But in fact, sometimes they reach enlightenment and then they stay in this realm to help us because they take the vow of the Bodhisattva, the vow of the Bodhicitta, which is, I will proceed towards enlightenment as fast as I can so I can get it, turn around and stop being filled with ignorance and actually aiding people's suffering through my ignorance and come back and give wisdom. And I will not go back into heaven. I will not go through that door of enlightenment until all sentient beings below me, I have helped to pull them up towards that. The vow of Kuan Yin is she will not go into heaven until all beings, even the worst of beings, the dragon, which represents all the lower animal forces, until she has redeemed that and taken that being with her. That is what you feel. If you have an intuition, sometimes even when you have an inspiration, you have the greatest desire to go back and serve all of humanity, all of humankind. And it will make no distinctions between people. You'll be like the sun. You'll shine on everyone. You will give warmth and light and this beautiful harmony of the spheres, this sound and this life. Matter of fact, the harmony of the spheres and life, these two realms of ascension and enlightenment, in many traditions that is called the tree of life. It is called New Jerusalem, Shambhala, Tushita heaven. There's so many names for it. But that is where we are headed. You could call it the throne. You can call it heaven, the seventh heaven. It doesn't really matter. And in fact, to be quite clear with you, we have attempted in all 7 of these presentations to stay away from religious, ecclesiastical doctrine, dogma, jargon, and the type of words that have a lot of meaning behind them that have been lost. If a story cannot be told directly from the human perspective, it's not worth hearing. So if you hear a story in some religion about this or that or this or that, but it doesn't relate to you, you don't need it. Those are of the past. They were good in the past, and many of these traditions were good in the past, but they're not the traditions we need now. We have to take a new vow of the Bodhisattva. And the new vow of the Bodhisattva is simply that we are going to not try to imagine some realms we just have names, ancient names for, but that we are going to strive to tame our astral body with absolute wonder, reverence, and awe. To work with our etheric body with that miraculous sense that Einstein described, so that when we see our etheric body, we see that it is in fact a gift from the cosmos filled with compassion. Infinite wisdom and compassion is in our life body. It is a gift that if we simply put our consciousness into our life body, you would have to be filled with gratitude for what it does for us, because we don't do any of that. Matter of fact, we work against it. We give it sometimes bad food, we give it bad rhythms, we give it bad habits, but the etheric body goes on. And the etheric body is worth and requires, in fact, just like the realm of ascension, it requires compassion, or else you cannot arise to love. Buddhism says there's 6 stages of compassion, and the 7th stage is love. Well, when you look at the etheric body, those are the stages of compassion. As we look at the physical body, we then get to see one of the most wondrous things in human life. It is called conscience. Conscience is the earmark of enlightenment. Let me explain about consciousness. Conscience, big difference. Consciousness we've spoken about so many times, but conscience, that part of yourself that tells you you've done something wrong, that part of yourself that makes you feel shame, that part of yourself that makes you feel bad when you go into your lower chakras. In the Greek times, in the dramas of Sophocles and Euripides and Aeschylus, they speak in one particular play of Antigone. And Antigone, who does this horrible thing to someone, is chased by what the Greeks believed were called the Furies, three very vicious feminine forces, your thinking, feeling, and willing, chasing you because you've done something wrong. In the play, it shows that in the Greek times, those forces of the Furies went from outside of yourself to inside, and they became what was called the Eumenides. Now, some people show that that is really talking about the forces of your kidneys. That your forces of your kidneys feels the pressure of your blood, and through that determines whether or not you know inside of your heart whether you're doing something right or wrong. Socrates called it his daemon. He said, when I would go to a crossroad and I needed to decide between right and left, if I went to the right and my daemon did not tell me I went wrong, I knew it was the right path. If I went to the left and the daemon said, you have gone wrong, I would go back and go to the right. In other words, it's the tree of knowledge of good and evil, isn't it? A conscience. Many people don't have a conscience in this day because they don't have love. But conscience is a force inside of us that is in fact the beginnings of us being a God. It's the ability to see that our deeds will be for good or ill. In other words, we become agents, conscious agents of karma. Did we do good? Did we do ill? We will understand consciously that what we sow, we will reap. And this is what enlightenment is all about. Enlightenment in the Eastern paths always includes reincarnation and karma, because they say that's what you would have to understand if you would reach these realms. In the Christian path, they call it illumination. They call it revelation. They call it divinity. They create a saint. They beatify. They have a canon. They have a rule. If you healed this many people, and if you did this in your life, and this in your life, and this in life, we know you're going to the realm of ascension. We know that you became initiated. And we recognize that. That can happen in our age. But when that happens, that's an extraordinary person, and they're reaching into the future to attain the forces and attain the capacities that they have in the future and bringing them back. And through these forces of wonder, of compassion, and of conscience, they tame the astral body, the etheric body, and the physical body, because that is what you need. The astral body must be tamed before you can be initiated. The etheric body must be brought into ritual, beautiful, sacred practices before you really can get a conscious understanding of ascension. And it is only through the forces of conscience, which are found literally in the physical body, that you must transform those forces before you can become enlightened. That is a long time in the future. But you can have those moments of intuition where you don't even feel like a god, even though you know you are participating in divine order. And that is that stage of enlightenment. The stage of enlightenment goes beyond the stage, as I pointed out, of your higher self, saying to all the other higher selves that you're working together, somewhat as a collective. But when you reach the stage of enlightenment, you no longer even have that awareness of self. You go out beyond the sun and the planets, into the realm of the stars, into the realm of the cosmos, and you even extinguish what we would think, which is unimaginable, consciousness. And that's why so many people are afraid that after death there is nothing. Because when you go far enough out, that is your experience. But if you go a little bit further, you find that you immediately come back into your center, to your heart. The heart can expand to the entire length of the cosmos, and that is the beauty of it. And that is why something very special sometimes happens. And I want to tell you that there was a Hindu teacher named Patanjali, and he wrote a series of aphorisms, and they're beautiful. Matter of fact, I believe that they are in volume 3 of the Gospel of Sophia. And if you look at these and you simply follow them, they're in simple terms, and they are speaking the way I'm speaking, where you're not using any jargon, but it's simply what the human being directly experiences. Instead of nirvana, it's imagination. We can all attain imagination and understand that, but if we say nirvana, you might not be able to. But what you find is a description, and this description is most amazing. He says 126 times the things you need to do, and the 127th time he says the most amazing things, something that we Westerners would really appreciate. He says, you can either do these 126, or you can just do one thing, which will do the same as the other 126. Can you imagine what that is? Can you imagine what it is that can get you to enlightenment instantaneously? It's something that you see all the time. It's something you see in someone who's not a guru, who's not a master. I usually see it in the janitors because I was an educator. So when I went into the building, the first person I talked to was the janitor. It's the simplest of things. In fact, to reach enlightenment, you have to do nothing but this one thing. And it only requires the slightest of effort. And that is called purity. Patanjali says, do the 126 or do the 127th, which is be pure. Because inside of us is a divine being. If you are purely who you are, you instantaneously reach intuition, or you have moments of enlightenment. Are any of us truly pure? This is the question. Now, there are beings who have done this. There are beings in many traditions, but I'll tell you one about a European tradition. But the Eastern traditions are very clear that hundreds and hundreds of people who were great teachers simply disappeared before his students' eyes. Just gone. We call it in the West sometimes the idea of human spontaneous combustion. But the point is you're there one minute and you're not. That's what showed up in Star Wars. That's what happened to Obi-Wan Kenobi. And what did he say? If you strike me down in anger, I will become more powerful than ever afterwards. In other words, if you are selflessly serving all others, you yourself, whether you want to or not, become more powerful because you become a god and you can serve even more. And so we see this, and we see the selflessness and even the clairvoyance that arises. We see people on the path of ascension, and as we look at this, we need to remember the story of Jakob Burma, or also called Jacob Boehme, if you look for the story. I mentioned this before. He was a cobbler. He was a very good cobbler. One day someone walked in, a great initiate, and gave him a test. And he passed the test because he was pure. And then this great initiate walked outside and called out his name and said, Jakob Burma, come forth. And he came forth and he says, you shall be a great master, one of the greatest masters in Europe. And Jakob Burma thought, well, I don't know what to think of this, seeing I can't read or write. I don't know how this could be possible. The person left. A few days later, he walked out to the same spot, turned around, looked in the window, and saw a pewter bowl. The sun shining on it went into his eye, and he became enlightened. Learned instantaneously how to speak 5 languages. He wrote some of the greatest books in Europe for spiritual mysticism. And he had what is called the golden moment of illumination. And since about 600 BC, human beings have now developed their own ego awareness to the point that they can have the golden moment of illumination. It happens with some saints. It's happened with people who have striven towards that, but it also has happened with people who are simply pure. And so when given the task to try to address the theme of enlightenment, I thought, this is a very difficult and impossible task. but we can describe some aspects that we can sense in our time now. And as we look at what we have presented in these 7 presentations, from revolution to apocalypse, to prophecy, singularity, to initiation, ascension, and enlightenment, we tried to show you the steps, the 7 steps that so many things go through that come into manifestation and then return to the spiritual world from which they came. So that is what we wanted to communicate on our site, ourspirit.com. We have many, many, many videos, many writings, many ebooks that will show you and share with you many of these same things, in much greater detail, of course. But when Tyla said to me, we need to do this for our subscribers. We need to give them a video that they can watch that gives them a view of what it is that we tried to do with our 3 books in the Gospel of Sophia and the 2 books on Waldorf education, or basically a new curriculum for the world, the one on ethers and the one on wisdom children and the eternal curriculum. She said, we need to encapsulate that for everyone. And I said, I don't think that's possible. I don't know how you could do that. You're taking 4,000 words and we're trying to deliver this in a way. So after great reflection, probably some of the deepest reflection that we've had, we tried to present this to you so that you would have a gift. This is a gift, not only from ourspirit.com, but also from some of our other sites, the Eternal Curriculum, from aimfortruth.org. This is an attempt to also be a bridge, to go from the world that is seen, that can be so confusing in revolution and apocalypse and the splitting of your own soul qualities, that we would try to give you the gift that could help you through those, so that then you could possibly make the free decision to proceed into the initiation path that we have described in the Gospel of Sophia and in the other 2 books that we have, and in also the hundreds of offerings that we've made on ourspirit.com for free, so that we can share with you. Because many years ago, Tyla had an experience that I myself have had a similar experience like, that was one of those moments that inspired her. And it took years and years and years to unpack the content of that, so that she could then present it in a way that could not only present a cosmology and take you through those steps, but present to you a possibility for you to give yourself your own self-initiation and to continue on that path that is described in the cosmology in the Gospel of Sophia. So this is what we've been able to present to you, and it was truly a love offering, and it's something that we so hope that we diffused it so that it would be meaningful for your life, and so that it would in every way only support the path that you're on, and in no way deter from it, but that it would support it in a way that would make you be possible to continue this path that we've described, that is the path of the future, but it's also the path of your own spiritual development. So I would like to now again speak a thank you for Tyla, our producer, who's done such a tremendous job, to Chad, and to our whole group here, and to the team. And to just say that we hope that these have been as valuable for you as they have been for us, as we have realized that as we look inside to find the divine, we will also find that outside of ourselves, and that they are one.